The letter arrived on a Tuesday, carried by a rider whose horse was half dead from the heat. It was folded twice, sealed with red wax, and it smelled faintly of lavender. Caleb Turner held it in his rough, sun-cracked hands for a long moment before he opened it. He was 34 years old, a widower twice over, and he had promised himself he would never love again. He only wanted a woman who could cook, mend a shirt, and keep the silence of his big empty house from swallowing him whole. That was all. Nothing more, nothing less. But when he broke that seal and read the words written in a small, careful hand, something inside him shifted, though he did not yet know it. He did not know that the woman traveling toward him on a rattling stagecoach through the burning Arizona dust was carrying a secret that would tear his world apart, rebuild it, and change the meaning of every scar on his body. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Wherever you are, sending love your way, and pull your chair a little closer to the fire, because this is a story about a man who ordered a wife the way other men order cattle, and about the day she stepped off that coach with dust on her face and a revolver hidden in her carpet bag. He did not know it yet, but by sundown one of them would be bleeding. The town was called Redemption, though nobody could remember why. It sat at the bottom of a wide, flat valley in the Arizona Territory, 3 days' ride from the nearest railroad and about 100 miles from anything a civilized person might call mercy. In the summer, the sun did not so much shine on Redemption as press down on it, hammering the tin roofs and cracking the wooden porches until the whole town seemed to groan under the weight of the sky. Dust moved through the streets like a living thing, curling around the legs of horses, sliding under the swinging doors of the saloon, settling on the hats of the men who sat outside the general store, saying nothing, watching everything. Caleb Turner rode into Redemption on a Wednesday afternoon, and the town watched him the way it always did. He was a tall man, broad in the shoulders, lean in the waist, with eyes the color of gunmetal after rain. He kept his beard short and his hat low, and he never smiled unless he meant it, which was almost never. Folks in Redemption had learned, over the years, not to ask him about his wives. The first had died of the fever 6 winters back. The second had died in childbirth, and the child with her, on a night so cold that the water in the pitcher had frozen solid by the bedside. After that, Caleb had gone quiet in a way that made grown men look at their boots when he walked past. He had a ranch out east of town, 300 acres of hard ground and stubborn cattle, and he worked it alone. He had a hand named Ezekiel who came by twice a week, an old black man with a laugh like distant thunder, but even Ezekiel could not fill the silence of that house. There were 4 rooms in it, and 3 of them had not been walked into in over a year. Caleb slept in the kitchen on a cot by the stove, because the bedroom still smelled like her, and he could not bear it. He had not planned to send for a bride. The idea had come to him one night in the winter just past, when the wind was howling down the chimney and he realized he had not spoken a word out loud in 11 days. He had counted them. 11 days without the sound of his own voice, and he had understood, in that moment, that a man could die of silence the same as he could die of thirst. So he had ridden into town the next morning, and he had gone to see the preacher, and the preacher had given him the name of a woman in St. Louis who ran a matrimonial service for lonely men out west. Caleb had written the letter himself, in his small, careful hand. He had not lied, but he had not offered much either. Widower, he wrote, 34. Ranch of my own, 300 acres. Do not drink to excess. Do not raise my hand. Cannot promise love, but can promise a roof, food, and honest company. That was all. He had sealed the letter, sent it off, and told himself he would not think about it again. But he had thought about it. Every day for 4 months he had thought about it and hated himself for thinking about it and thought about it more. And now, on this Wednesday afternoon, the reply had come. He read it standing in the middle of the road, with the stagecoach driver watching him from the box, chewing tobacco. The letter said her name was Miss Amelia Rose Whitcomb, that she was 26 years of age, that she had been a schoolteacher in a town called Vicksburg before the war and then a nurse during it, and that she had lost her family in the burning of Atlanta. She said she was not looking for love. She said she was looking for a place to stand where the ground did not shake beneath her feet. She said she could cook, she could sew, and she could shoot a rifle if the situation called for it. She said she would arrive on the 11th of July, and she asked him not to be late, because she had learned to distrust men who kept a woman waiting. Caleb read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, put it inside his vest, and looked up at the driver. "The 11th of July, he said. "That is next Tuesday." The driver spat brown juice into the dust. "Yes, sir, Mr. Turner. Next Tuesday it is." Caleb nodded once, mounted his horse, and rode back out toward the ranch. He did not know that 120 miles to the east, a woman in a black traveling dress was already sitting in the corner of a rattling coach, one hand on her carpet bag, the other resting lightly on the grip of a small, blue steel revolver she had bought in Kansas City for $4.11. She had not told the man in Arizona about the revolver. She had not told him about a great many things. The coach rattled west, and the sun went down, and somewhere out in the dark, a coyote called to its own kind. Miss Amelia Rose Whitcomb closed her eyes and let the wheels carry her toward redemption, and toward the man she had never met, and toward the reason she had come. Tuesday came slow, the way heavy days always do. Caleb woke before the sun, shaved with a straight razor and cold water, put on a clean shirt that he had not worn since his second wife had been buried in it, and rode into town 2 hours earlier than he needed to. He tied his horse to the rail outside the depot, sat down on the bench beside the door, and waited. He did not read a paper. He did not speak to anyone. He just sat, and the town moved around him, quiet and curious, watching the widower Turner wait for a woman who had come all the way from St. Louis to marry him. The coach was late. It was always late, but on this day it was later than usual, and by the time the driver finally cracked his whip at the far end of Main Street, the sun was straight overhead and the shadows had crawled back under the porches to hide. Caleb stood up. He did not know why his hands were shaking. He put them in his pockets so no one would see. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in a long, slow cloud of yellow dust. The driver climbed down and opened the door, and a small drummer in a checkered suit stepped out first, coughing into a handkerchief, followed by a preacher with a Bible under his arm. Then, for a long moment, no one else came, and Caleb felt something cold and familiar tighten around his chest, and he thought, of course she has not come. Of course a woman like that would not truly cross a country to marry a man like me. And then she stepped out. She was smaller than he had expected, but she carried herself as though she were taller. She wore a black traveling dress, dust gray at the hem, and a bonnet that had once been fine but was now sun-faded to the color of weak tea. Her hair, where it showed at her temples, was the color of dark honey. Her face was thinner than a healthy woman's face should be, and there was a bruise, old and yellowing, on her left cheekbone that she had tried to cover with powder. But her eyes, when she raised them to look at him, were steady and green and did not blink. She held a carpet bag in her right hand. She did not set it down. "Mr. Turner," she said. Her voice was low and quiet, and it had a soft southern shape to it, but there was iron underneath. "Miss Whitcomb," he said. He took his hat off. He did not know he was going to do that until he had done it. They stood there in the street for a long second, looking at each other, and the town watched them. He could feel eyes at every window. He cleared his throat. "I have the wagon," he said. "It is around the side. You must be tired." "I am tired," she said, "but I would prefer to be married before I sleep." That surprised him. He blinked. "There is no need to rush," he said carefully. "There is every need," she said. Her eyes moved past him, down the street, back the way the stagecoach had come, just for a second, then back to him. "I have traveled a long distance. I would like the matter settled." He looked at her. He looked at the bruise on her cheek. He looked at the way her fingers were tight and pale around the handle of the carpet bag. And though a wiser man might have asked a question, Caleb Turner was a man who had learned that some questions were not his to ask. "All right," he said. "The preacher is right there." They were married in the street. Took less than 4 minutes. The preacher, still holding the Bible he had brought off the coach, spoke the words, and Caleb said, "I do," in a voice that sounded strange in his own ears, and Amelia said, "I do," in a voice so quiet it almost blew away in the wind. There was no ring. Caleb had forgotten a ring. He apologized. She said it did not matter. Then he lifted her carpet bag, and she did not let it go until he had pried it, gently, from her fingers. It was heavier than it should have been. He noticed that. He helped her up onto the wagon. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her back straight, her eyes forward, and she did not look at the town, and the town did not look at her. Caleb climbed up, took the reins, and clucked to the horses, and the wagon rolled out of Redemption and onto the long dusty road that led east to the ranch. They rode for a long time in silence. The sun beat down. A hawk turned slow circles in the sky above them. Finally, without looking at him, she spoke. "Mr. Turner," she said, "I must tell you something." "Yes, ma'am." "There is a man who may come looking for me." He kept his eyes on the road. His hands did not move on the reins. "I see," he said. "He is not a good man." I gathered. She turned her head then, slowly, and looked at him. "If he comes," she said, "I will not go with him. I would rather die in your kitchen than live in his house one more day." Caleb was quiet for a long time. A dust devil rose in the field to their left, twisted itself up into the sky, and fell apart into nothing. Somewhere far off, a cow bellowed. "Miss Whitcomb," he said at last. "Mrs. Turner, I mean, this is your home now. Nobody is going to take you out of it. You have my word on that." She did not say thank you. She just turned her face forward again, and Caleb saw that her eyes were wet, but she did not let a single tear fall. Not one. She just sat there, straight-backed, and let the wind dry her eyes as the wagon rolled on toward the ranch, and toward whatever was coming after her. The ranch house was a low, long thing built of adobe and pine, and it sat at the edge of a shallow creek that ran cold and clear even in the worst part of summer. There was a barn beside it, and a corral behind that, and a single cottonwood tree in the yard that Caleb's first wife had planted 12 years ago, when it was no thicker than her wrist. Now it was taller than the house, and it threw a long soft shadow across the porch, and in that shadow Caleb stopped the wagon and set the brake and climbed down. Amelia climbed down before he could come around to help her. He noted that too. She was not a woman who liked to be reached for. He carried her carpet bag into the house and set it on the kitchen table. She followed him in and stood just inside the door, looking around. Caleb tried to see the house the way she must be seeing it. The stove was black and clean. The floor was swept. There was a pot of stew simmering slow on the back burner, because he had put it on before dawn. There was a jar of wildflowers on the windowsill, yellow and blue, that he had cut himself that morning from the creek bank. He had felt foolish cutting them. Now, watching her look at them, he was glad he had. "You cut those," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "For me?" "Yes, ma'am." She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she took off her bonnet, slowly, and set it on the table beside her carpet bag, and Caleb saw for the first time the full weight of the exhaustion in her face. She had been holding it back on the road. She had been holding it back in the street. She could not hold it back anymore. "Mr. Turner," she said, "I have not slept a full night in 9 weeks. There is a bed," he said. "The bedroom is yours. I sleep in the kitchen." She looked at him. "That is not proper." "I do not much care about proper," he said. "You are safe here. Take the bed." She was too tired to argue. He carried her carpet bag into the bedroom, the one he had not entered in over a year, and he set it down at the foot of the bed. He had aired the room out that morning. He had washed the sheets in the creek and dried them in the sun. He had opened the window to let the ghosts out. She stood in the doorway and watched him, and her eyes softened, just for a moment, before the wall came back up. "Thank you," she said. "There is water in the pitcher," he said. "And the stew will be ready when you wake. Sleep as long as you need." He closed the door behind him and stood in the hallway for a long time, listening. He heard her sit down on the bed. He heard the small heavy sound of her carpet bag being lifted, and then the small hard click of something being taken out of it. He did not have to be told what it was. He had heard that sound too many times in his life. He walked back into the kitchen. He sat down at the table. He looked at the yellow and blue flowers in the jar, and he thought about the bruise on her cheek, and he thought about the man who had put it there, and something old and cold and very familiar moved through him, and he closed his hand into a fist and then opened it again. She slept for 14 hours. He did not sleep at all. He sat on the porch through the night with his rifle across his knees, and he watched the road that led back to redemption, and he listened to the coyotes talk to each other out in the dark. He thought about 100 things, and he tried not to think about the way she had said his name. Just before dawn, he heard the door open behind him. He did not turn around. She came out onto the porch in a nightdress that must have been packed at the bottom of her bag, with a shawl thrown over her shoulders, and she sat down on the bench beside him. She did not sit close, but she did not sit far either. They watched the sky go pale together. "Mr. Turner," she said. "Caleb," he said. "If you can. It is my name." She nodded slowly. "Caleb." The way she said it was like she was trying the word out, the way a person tastes a new fruit. Something in his chest turned over. "You did not sleep," she said. "No, ma'am." "Amelia. Amelia." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "The man who is coming. His name is Randall Croft. He is my brother-in-law. My sister married him, and he beat her to death 2 years ago, and no one did anything about it because he owns half the county we lived in. When I told the sheriff laughed at me. When I went to the newspaper, the editor turned me out. I stayed in that house for a year afterward because he said he would kill me if I tried to leave, and I believed him. Then, 9 weeks ago, I stole $4 from his coat pocket, and I bought a train ticket, and I ran." Caleb did not speak. "He will find me," she said. "He is a patient man. He has money, and he has people who work for him, and he will find me eventually. I did not want to lie to you. I did not want to bring my trouble to your door. But I had nowhere else to go, and when I saw your letter, I thought, that is a man who has known grief, and he will not turn me away." She looked at him, and her eyes were as steady as they had been in the street. "If you want me to leave," she said, "I will leave. I will take my bag, and I will walk into town, and I will find another coach, and you will never hear from me again." Caleb Turner did not answer her right away. He looked out at the road. The sky was turning pink at the edges. Somewhere in the barn, a horse stamped its foot. "Amelia," he said, "this is your home." That was all he said. But it was enough. She began, quietly, in the pink dawn light, to cry. And he did not reach for her because he had learned she did not like to be reached for. But he sat there beside her while she did it, and neither of them saw the rider on the ridge across the valley. A mile away, watching the house through a brass spyglass, his mouth twisted into a slow, satisfied smile. For 11 days nothing happened. That was the strange and terrible thing about it. For 11 days, the sun rose and the sun set, and Caleb Turner and Amelia Turner moved carefully around each other in the low adobe house, learning the shape of a life neither of them had expected to be living. She cooked. He mended fence. She washed the sheets in the creek and hung them on the line, and the wind snapped them white and clean against the blue Arizona sky. He caught a rabbit in a snare and brought it home, and she skinned it as fast as any man he had ever seen, and he did not ask where she had learned that. He was learning that with her, questions were doors that opened when she was ready, and not before. They did not speak of Randall Croft, but Caleb cleaned his rifle every night. And Amelia, he noticed, kept the blue steel revolver in the pocket of her apron when she was in the kitchen, and under her pillow when she slept. On the 4th night, over supper, she asked him about his wives. He had not expected the question, and he set his fork down slowly. "You do not have to tell me," she said. "No," he said. "It is fair. You told me your things." So he told her. He told her about Sarah, the first one, and the fever that had come in the spring of '68, and how she had died in 3 days, so fast he had not had time to send for a doctor. He told her about Mary, the second one, and the long cold winter, and the baby that had come feet first and would not come the rest of the way, and the way Mary had looked at him at the end and said, "It is all right, Caleb, it is all right." He told her about the 11 days of silence, and the letter he had written to St. Louis, and the way he had almost thrown it in the fire before he sent it. Amelia listened. She did not interrupt. When he was done, she reached across the table very slowly and put her small calloused hand on top of his and left it there for the span of 3 breaths, and then took it back. That night, for the first time in over a year, Caleb slept in the bedroom on the floor on a blanket at the foot of the bed. She had asked him to. She had said she slept better when she could hear another person breathing. He did not argue. He lay awake most of the night, listening to her breathing above him, and he thought, this is not what I sent for. This is not what I sent for at all, and it is more. On the 11th day, the stranger came. Caleb was mending the west fence when he saw the rider on the road. He was still a mile off, but Caleb knew right away that it was not anyone from Redemption. The horse was too tall, and the rider sat too straight, and there was a shine to his hat that spoke of city money. Caleb set down his hammer. He picked up his rifle from where it lay against the fence post. He walked slowly back toward the house. Amelia was on the porch, shelling peas. She looked up when she saw his face. "Go inside," Caleb said quietly. "Bar the door. Load the shotgun. Do not come out for anyone but me." She did not ask any questions. She went. The rider came up the road at an easy pace. He was a big man, 45 or so, wide through the shoulders, with a heavy black mustache and small pale eyes. He wore a fine gray coat, though it was too hot for it, and a silver chain looped across his vest. He drew up at the fence and touched the brim of his hat. "Afternoon," he said. His voice was smooth and pleasant. "Would you be Mr. Caleb Turner?" "I would. My name is Randall Croft. I have come a long way to speak with you. I wonder if I might trouble you for a cup of water." Caleb rested the rifle but on his hip. He did not raise it. He did not lower it. "I have water," he said. "But I do not know that we have anything to speak about, Mr. Croft." Croft smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not touch his eyes. "I believe we do. I believe a woman named Amelia Whitcomb has come to your house under false pretenses. I believe she is my sister-in-law, and I have come to take her home." "There is a woman here named Amelia Turner," Caleb said. "She is my wife." The smile did not move on Croft's face, but something behind his eyes went very still. "Your wife?" "Yes, sir. Married by the preacher in Redemption 11 days ago. There is a record of it. There are witnesses." "I see." Croft was quiet for a long moment. His horse shifted under him. "Mr. Turner, I do not think you understand the situation. Amelia is not well. She has been suffering from certain delusions since the death of my late wife, her sister, and she has spoken untruths about me across 3 states now. I am not here to cause you trouble. I am here to bring her home so she may receive proper care." "That is a fine speech," Caleb said. "I expect you have given it a few times." Croft's smile finally left his face. "Mr. Turner," he said, and his voice was different now, lower, flatter. "I am a wealthy man. I can make your life very comfortable. I can also make it very short. I would prefer the first, but the choice is yours." Caleb Turner looked up at him for a long time. The wind moved through the grass. A hawk cried somewhere far off. When he spoke, his voice was as quiet as it had been all along. "Mr. Croft," he said, "I have buried 2 women I loved in the ground on that hill behind my house. I am not afraid of a 3rd grave. But I promise you, if there is one dug on this land in the coming days, it will not be for my wife. Now you are on my property, and I am asking you politely to leave it." Croft looked at him. Then he looked past him toward the house. His pale eyes moved across the porch, the door, the windows. Caleb saw him note the barred shutter. Saw him note the 2nd rifle he had left leaning against the porch post so it would be visible from the road. "I will leave," Croft said finally, "for today. But we are not done, Mr. Turner. Not you and I. Not by a long chalk." He turned his horse. He rode away slowly, and he did not look back. Caleb stood at the fence until the dust had settled behind him, and then for a long time after that. When he finally walked back to the house, Amelia was standing just inside the door, the shotgun in her hands, both barrels cocked. Her face was as white as the sheets on the line. She had heard everything. He will come back, she said. Yes, Caleb said. He will. With men. Yes. She lowered the shotgun. She looked at him, and there was something new in her eyes now, something he had not seen there before, something that was not fear. Then we had better be ready, she said. They had 2 days. Maybe 3. Croft would need to ride back to Redemption at least and telegraph for the men he would bring, and the men would need to travel, and that would take time. Not much, but some. And Caleb Turner knew how to use time the way a poor man knows how to use flour. He rode to Ezekiel's place before the sun was up. Ezekiel lived in a small tight cabin at the north end of the valley, with his wife Ruth and a boy of 12 named Isaac. Caleb told them plainly what was coming. He said he would not ask them to stay. He said he would understand if they took the wagon and went south to Ruth's people in Tucson, and he would give them money for the road. Ezekiel listened to the whole thing without saying a word, and then he took his old army rifle down from above the door and set it on the table. I fought at Vicksburg, Caleb Turner, he said. I did not fight for the honor of running from a man like Randall Croft. You tell me where to stand. Ruth, who was a very small woman with very large hands, only said, I can shoot too, and I can load faster than either of them. Do not leave me out. They rode back to the ranch together, all 4 of them, with the boy Isaac holding tight to his mother's waist behind her saddle. Caleb had not asked for this. He had not wanted it. But he understood, riding at the head of that small dusty column, that a man does not always get to choose his family, and sometimes his family chooses him. He looked over his shoulder once, and Amelia was riding beside Ruth, and the 2 women were speaking in low voices, and Amelia was almost smiling. They spent the day getting ready. Caleb and Ezekiel dug a shallow trench along the low ridge behind the house, where a man could lie flat and see the road for half a mile. Ruth and Amelia filled every pot and pan and bucket in the house with creek water, in case of fire. They shuttered the windows with iron bars Caleb had made in the forge 2 winters back and never had occasion to use. They laid out rifles and shotguns and powder and lead on the kitchen table. Isaac, the boy, was given the job of watching the road from the loft of the barn with a spyglass. He took the job with the deadly seriousness of a 12-year-old who has been trusted with a man's work for the first time in his life. That night, they sat around the table together, and Ruth said grace, and they ate a supper of stew and cornbread. It was, Caleb realized with a sudden aching in his chest, the first meal he had eaten with more than one other person at his table in 6 years. The lamp burned yellow. The wind moved in the cottonwood outside. Isaac spilled his milk and blushed to the roots of his hair, and Ruth laughed and cuffed him gently on the ear, and Amelia laughed too, a small quiet sound, and Caleb looked at her across the table, and their eyes met and held. He walked her out to the porch after the meal. The stars were out, thick and cold. Somewhere far off a coyote sang. Caleb, she said, there is something I have not told you. He waited. When my sister died, she said. She was carrying a child, Croft's child. He did not know. She had not yet told him. She told only me. She paused. The child died with her, under his fists. But I was there when she passed, and I made her a promise. I promised her I would not let him do it to another woman. That is why I ran. Not just for myself. For the next one. There is always a next one, with men like him. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. You did not come here to hide, he said slowly. No, she said. I did not know what I came here for. I thought I did. I thought I came to find a place to stand. But standing is not enough, Caleb. Not anymore. She looked up at him. When he comes, I want to be at your side. Not behind a door. Not under a bed. At your side. Do you understand me? He looked down at her small, tired, beautiful face, and he understood, and he did something he had not done since Mary had died. He reached out very slowly, so that she could stop him if she wanted to, and he put his hand on the side of her face, and his thumb brushed the faded yellow of the old bruise on her cheek. She did not flinch. She did not pull away. She closed her eyes, just for a second, and she leaned, just the smallest amount, into his hand. I understand, he said. They did not kiss. Not that night. But something passed between them on that porch under the cold stars, and it was more binding than any kiss, and they both knew it. The next morning, at first light, Isaac came running from the barn, his eyes as wide as saucers. "Riders," he panted. "6 of them, coming up the road." Caleb was already on his feet. Ezekiel was already at the door. Ruth was already at the kitchen table, loading. Amelia was already reaching for the blue steel revolver. "Take your places," Caleb said. His voice was steady. His hands were steady. He had been ready for this fight, he realized, his whole life. He just had not known it. "Do not fire until I fire." "And Amelia?" She looked at him. "Stay low. Stay behind the wall by the window. And if it goes bad, you take Isaac and you ride south and you do not look back." "It will not go bad," she said. "Amelia." "It will not go bad," she said again. "Because we are together, Caleb Turner. And that changes the arithmetic." He looked at her for one long second. Then he picked up his rifle and he walked out onto the porch, and the 6 riders came up the road in a long slow line, and Randall Croft was at the head of them, and the sun was just clearing the ridge, and it was going to be, Caleb thought, a very hard morning. They stopped about 80 yards from the house. Croft raised his hand and his men reined in behind him. They were rough men, hard-eyed, the kind of men who did not ask why they were being paid, only how much. 2 of them had rifles across their saddles. 1 had a shotgun. All of them had pistols. Caleb Turner counted them once, and then he counted them again, and he did the arithmetic Amelia had spoken of, and he thought 6 against 4, and one of the 4 is a boy of 12. It was not good arithmetic, but it was the arithmetic he had. Croft cupped his hands around his mouth. "Turner," he called. His voice carried thin and clear across the yard. "Turner, come out. I want to talk to you like a reasonable man." Caleb stepped out onto the porch. He did not raise his rifle. He held it easy in his hands, muzzle down, the way a man holds a rifle when he is not yet decided. "I am here, Croft," he said. He did not shout. His voice carried anyway. There was something about the morning that made every sound bigger. "I have brought you an offer, Turner," Croft called. $500 in gold right now. You send the woman out, and me and my men ride away, and you never see us again, and you keep the money and your ranch and your life. It is a good offer, Turner. It is the last one you will get." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Croft, I want to tell you something. Are you listening?" "I am listening." "There is a woman inside that house," Caleb said. "She is my wife. Before she was my wife, she was your sister-in-law. Before that, she was a schoolteacher. Before that, she was a little girl in a town called Vicksburg, who I imagine ran barefoot in the summers and picked wild strawberries with her sister. She has been a great many things, Croft. But she has never been, and she will never be, something that a man buys or sells. Not you. Not me. Not any man. So you can take your $500 in gold, and you can ride it back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Because she is not for sale. Not for any price. Not today. Not ever." There was a long silence. Then Croft's face changed. The pleasant mask fell off it, all at once, like a sheet sliding off a chair. What was underneath was not pleasant at all. "Have it your way, Turner," he said, and he drew his pistol. Everything happened very fast then, and yet, Caleb would remember afterward, everything also happened very slow. Croft raised his pistol, and Caleb raised his rifle, and Caleb was faster, but only just, and his shot took Croft high in the right shoulder and spun him half off his horse. One of Croft's men fired at the same time, and the bullet struck the porch post 6 inches from Caleb's head and sent splinters flying. Caleb dropped behind the porch rail and worked the lever. From the ridge behind the house, Ezekiel's old army rifle spoke. One clean, loud crack, and one of the riders threw up his hands and fell. From the loft of the barn, Isaac, who had been given the shotgun for the last resort, did not fire, because Caleb had told him not to fire unless a man got within 20 feet of the barn, and Isaac was a good boy who did as he was told. From the kitchen window, 2 shots came almost at once. Ruth's shot took a rider in the leg. Amelia's shot, from the blue steel revolver, took another rider clean off his horse, and Caleb learned in that moment that she had not been lying when she said she could shoot. Croft, bleeding, was screaming at his men to charge the house. Two of them did. One of them, wiser, wheeled his horse and rode. Caleb rose up from behind the porch rail and shot the first of the two charging men out of his saddle at 40 yards. The second man made it to the porch. He was a huge man, red-bearded, with a shotgun in one hand and a Bowie knife in the other. He came up the porch steps with the shotgun raised, and Caleb's rifle was empty, and there was no time to reload. There was a shot from behind Caleb. The huge man's head snapped back, and he fell down the porch steps and lay still. Caleb turned. Amelia was standing in the doorway, the blue steel revolver in both hands, smoke curling from the barrel. Her face was as white as bone. Her hands were as steady as stone. "Behind you," she said. Caleb spun. Randall Croft, one arm hanging useless, was crawling up out of the dust with his pistol in his good hand. He raised it, wavering. Caleb dropped his empty rifle. He drew the pistol at his own belt, and he shot Randall Croft one time in the center of the chest, and Randall Croft fell backward into the dust of the yard and did not move again. The silence that followed was enormous. It rang. Somewhere, a horse whinnied. Somewhere, the wind moved. Caleb stood on the porch with his pistol still raised, and slowly, slowly he lowered it. Ezekiel came down from the ridge. Ruth came out of the house, still holding her rifle, her face grim and steady. Isaac climbed down from the loft, shotgun in hand, his eyes as wide as they had been at dawn, but now with something else in them, something older. And Amelia walked out onto the porch and stood beside Caleb, and she took his free hand in hers, and she held it, and she did not let go. They buried the dead men in a long shallow trench at the far end of the property, all except Randall Croft. Him, Caleb wrapped in an old canvas sheet, and he loaded him onto the wagon, and he drove him into Redemption himself, and he laid him out on the boards in front of the sheriff's office, and he told the sheriff plainly what had happened and who had shot first. The sheriff, an old man named Bartlett who had known Caleb Turner all his life, looked at the body and then at Caleb and then at the body again, and he said, "Well, Turner, I reckon that is self-defense on your own property, and there is not a jury in Arizona that would say otherwise." And that was the end of it as far as the law was concerned. But it was not the end of the story. Not yet. The years afterward were not perfect. Nothing ever is. But they were good years. Long, slow, good years. Amelia Turner planted a garden along the south wall of the house, and it grew tomatoes and squash and, in the second summer, roses. Caleb Turner built a new room onto the back of the house, and it was not for a guest, and it was not for storage. It was for a child. And in the fall of that second year, a baby girl was born in that room, red-faced and squalling and healthy, and Amelia named her Hope, because she said that was the only name that fit. Ruth was the midwife, and Ezekiel stood outside the door with Caleb, and both men cried when they heard the first cry, and neither of them was ashamed of it. Isaac, who was 14 by then, was allowed to hold the baby first after her mother and father, and he did it very carefully, like a man being handed the sun. Caleb never told Hope, when she got older, exactly what had happened on the morning of the hard sun. He told her only that her mother had come a long way to find him, and that some men had tried to take her back, and that they had not been able to. He said her mother had been the bravest person he had ever known. He said that on the day she stepped off the stagecoach in Redemption, he had thought he was getting a wife who could cook and mend a shirt and keep the silence of his big empty house from swallowing him. He said what he had gotten instead was a whole life he had not known he was allowed to have. Sometimes, in the evenings, when the sun was going down red behind the ridge and the swallows were cutting their fast dark shapes across the sky, Caleb would sit on the porch with Amelia, and they would not speak. They did not need to. His hand would find hers, and her head would rest against his shoulder, and the cottonwood would move in the wind, and somewhere in the house a child would laugh, and Caleb Turner would think, quietly, that a man had ordered a wife the way other men order cattle, and the wife had walked off the coach with dust on her face and a revolver in her bag, and she had saved his life. Not once. Every day. He had prepared for a cold, loveless marriage. He had prepared for a house that would stay half empty until the day he died. He had not prepared for her. He never could have. And if you had been there, sitting on that porch with the red sun going down and the wind in the cottonwood tree, and a child laughing somewhere in the house, and you had asked Caleb Turner what he thought about the life a man is given, he would have taken off his hat, and he would have looked at the ground for a long moment, and he would have said, quietly, sometimes, friends, sometimes the letter that arrives on a Tuesday changes everything. Sometimes the coach you dread most brings you the only person who could ever have saved you. And sometimes, out here in this hard, dry, beautiful country, love does not come the way the poets say it comes. It comes with dust on its face, and a revolver in its bag, and eyes that do not blink. And it is worth everything a man has. Every single thing. What would you have done if you had been Caleb Turner standing on that porch as the stagecoach rolled in? Would you have opened the door of your life to a stranger? Tell me in the comments below. I would like to know.